to take a step back from my career with the intent of being able to help as many entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs as possible, because I really believe that that's what helps us create a really flourishing and amazing future. So I'll just give you a little bit of background who I am, so y'all have some credibility with y'all. Um, I'm an engineer by education. I started my career at NASA, and I pursued a corporate career after that to commercialize some, very innovative R&D technologies. One of them you might be able to look up is called the spring tire. That's a really fun one. It's a tire, airless tire that's going to go to the moon and Mars in the next missions. And one of my first ventures was to commercialize that here for terrestrial applications. One of the challenges that I found with that was being able to communicate with corporate executives about both short, medium, and long-term R&D projects and the ROIs, the return on investments associated with those. And so I spent a lot of my career motivated by helping these really innovative technologies and wonderful inventors to improve their ability to communicate the value of the products and services that they're working on, as well as be able to articulate it in a business context. And I'm going to focus a lot on that today. And that really helped trigger, I'm really grateful for the ride I had with my career, both with product innovation, leveraging new technologies, and the emergence of big data and machine learning. So I kind of caught both those waves. And in both of those, I spent a lot of time helping corporate ventures across the Fortune 500, as well as a few startups. And now I'm doing that as a fractional COO because that's a need I've really identified. And I was able to step back from my career to start doing that because a lot of this, I don't want to call it education, but the ability to understand how to learn about business and how to wrap an amazing technology with new business models, and communicate those to customers, to investors, and then ultimately how to build a business out of that was an opportunity I felt like I could bring to the world. And so today I'm really grateful to be able to talk about something I'm very passionate, which is really at the core of a lot of those things I just mentioned in terms of communicating and improving the odds of success with any new venture. And that's talking about value. So today I'm going to go through some high-level definitions of value in the context of entrepreneurship, because this is always, and this is the same conversation I have with Fortune 500 executives, venture capitalists, or starting entrepreneurs, or even students, which I spent a lot of time in VCU at the Da Vinci Center, helping coaching them and helping them understand how to build a business. And it all is grounded around value and the definition of value and how to communicate that. So I thought when I was asked to do the speaker series, that might be a great first step, as well as to be able to help any of you online and offline in the future with your ventures. This is where it really starts, and it's something that is overlooked quite quickly and easily, but yet it's so fundamental. And it just makes everything really easy through the process, or much easier. Nothing's easy, but much easier to communicate with customers, stakeholders, and other investors when everyone is talking about the same thing in terms of value. So I'm going to give you some perspective on that today. And I hope to add some other value with some book recommendations as well. So I'm going to maybe spend a few minutes on each slide, and then just to hit the high points. And then if you have questions afterwards, we can go back and revisit the slides and dive deeper. I always believe discussion is more important than lecture, so I want to leave plenty of time for that. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in and hit some of these really fun topics. The first is, I like to start with a really useful definition of entrepreneurship. This is a definition that Harvard has used for a long time. And it just really simplifies things, which is entrepreneurship as pursuing novel opportunities to create value while lacking resources. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, I like to boil it down to first principles. And really what we're doing in entrepreneurship is we have assets. These are the things that we control. I'm not going to go too deep into assets today, but there are things like, channels, there are things like your skills, there are things like financial assets. It's not just financial. It's a lot, all the things that you have personally, or your business, or the community you're surrounded around. It's how can you leverage those things in order to create value? And so we build on our assets to create value, to go out and acquire new resources, to then go back and enhance and maintain our assets. So that's just a very simple cycle of entrepreneurship, because we don't have those resources. We need to leverage what we have today. We need to figure out how to create value for other people, capture part of that value, and then enrich our assets. Especially from a stakeholder perspective, it is very, very, I find that this is one of the things in pitches and investor communications. Just for context, I've raised over $300 million in capital for various projects, or helped companies do that. And one of the things that really gets hung up is when the business or the technology or the customers aren't aligned with the core assets of where the business is starting. And so as you start to get further and further away from how you leverage what you have today in order to create what you want in the future, investors start to see more and more difficulty in understanding how that's going to be successful. So really grounding a conversation around what are we doing to create value is the starting point, and that helps normalize everyone to the same topic. And then it also helps, especially investors, to get confident that what exists today can actually be built upon, instead of talking about value without having any fundamentals underneath of that. So again, just breaking down entrepreneurship, just to make it as simple as possibly can, where it's pursuing novel opportunities while lacking resources, and then you build around assets, create value, and you continue to build out your assets. And that's how companies are built. So the second thing, click through here, the second slide, is I'm going to focus a lot on first principles today. So I want to just also create a very simple definition of value. Again, something that's overlooked a lot, especially in communication, both with customers and with investors. Value is just very simple. It's providing a way for a person or an organization to do something better than what they're currently able to do today, better than alternatives on the market. But that's really how value is created. There's a delta, there's a difference in what's achievable today versus what the current state is, versus what the potential future state is with your solution. And there's a hierarchy of value. We also overlook this a lot of times. We focus very much on the transactional nature around things like it can improve efficiency, or it can simplify your operations, or it saves time, or it connects one person to another. And those are great, but they're very functional. And the impact of communicating value in terms of just functional is that one of the most important things in business is that it impacts your ability to price. So the goal is always to communicate value in a way where it's articulating how you're helping someone else do something better. But then not just focus on functional. Ultimately, you want to be able to, to some extent, be able to change somebody's life, or change the way a company moves forward strategically. That would be the top of the pyramid in terms of value. And then things are in between, which again, we forget a lot with business, is that companies are all people, and people have emotions. And so understanding what people are going through on a day-to-day basis, and how they feel about certain things, or how it might improve their mood or state in their job, is more value than just it saves them time. And then, like I said, life-changing, and the ability to have social impact is traditionally looked at as the highest value, and being able to communicate your product or service, as well as your brand mission in terms of how you're impacting the world, is always a great leading conversation to ground your audience and your customers into why you're even there and why you're trying to help them. Because every salesperson that walks in and talks to everyone, I know you all gotten pitched with a lot of different things over the years, and whether you're buying a car, buying a house, you're buying something at the store, and we think about what value means to us. But then when we try to communicate value of our product or service to someone else, it's sometimes we lose that context and ultimately think that's the thing that grounds us in terms of why are we even doing what we're doing? Why is this a business opportunity? Why is this a venture? Because we're out to try to help someone or a group of people do something better than what they currently do today. So let me give an example for that. This is one of my favorite examples. I've done a lot of work in the space of staffing and also employee turnover, and try to, even to the extent of helping students get jobs or people change careers. And one of the things that I've noticed repeatedly is the actual total cost of what a headcount turnover in a company really is. And so let me communicate that. So let's say, for example, that a recruiting company is going to a corporation and saying, hey, we can go out and get you the best talent. We're going to simplify things for you. And you're going to pay us some sort of fee. Okay, well, great. Like, depending on what the pricing is, would convey the value of the service. Well, let's actually take a wide lens and take a step back and look at how how a recruiting service can tap into different values in terms of the value pyramid. Well, one, what is the total cost of hiring an employee? That's what most people will want to talk about. Second, when you have employee turnover, how does that impact the actual service that that company is offering to its customers? When you remove somebody from a mix, a key employee from the mix, or you don't have enough people to do customer service, how does that affect the ability for that company to deliver its products and services successfully? Second or third, workplace culture. So when you have a lot of turnover, it really creates a dynamic, and I'm sure all of you have experienced this in some way, shape, and form. But when you have constant revolving door of people coming in and out, it's hard to get to know people. It's hard to build and maintain projects and maintain continuity, and that has a cost as well if you lose an employee there. What about lost productivity and engagement? So again, it's like morale can be affected by having a lot of change in employee turnover. And then finally, something that may seem trivial, but is not, is the actual cost to train an employee, the cost to bring someone on board. So the actual total value in terms of communicating some sort of HR or recruiting service to a company, you could talk about each one of those things, but if you take a step and look back at all of them, try to quantify the impact of employee turnover, it's actually that business, it's 160% to 250% of their salary. So almost 2.5 to 3 times the actual salary of that employee is the actual cost of employee turnover. So I like to use this example for both these reasons. One, because it's just something that kind of can hit home for most people in terms of like, we all value ourselves as employees, and we think of ourselves as valuable to an organization. And what is the actual cost to that organization if we were to leave the company, or if we were to have a poor relationship with them? And it actually has a significant material cost for the long-term viability of that company if they don't have a stable employee engagement system. And then second, from a founder perspective or from a venture perspective, one of the number one thing, in my opinion, that I've seen of working with hundreds of startups and hundreds of ventures is that the ability to hire and maintain the talent on the team is the number one reason that company will be successful or fail. And so why is that? Well, let's say you raise $1 million for your startup, and you have to hire a few people, and you're going to run out of that $1 million in, say, 12 to 18 months, trying to get your product and service to the next level, trying to get new customers. And if you have, in that time, you start losing employees, it's more than just losing the employee. It has a significant financial cost of 2.5 times what the actual salary of the employee costs. So, trying to hire somebody in a short time frame, it has a big impact. So it's very important to consider from that perspective. And then also as a founder, you can just imagine how you would feel if you lost a key employee at a very critical time. So I like to use it because it hits home. I like to use this example a lot in terms of thinking about how you would feel, how an employee feels, and then also how to communicate value to a company in terms of just taking a step back and looking at all the different ways that your product or service can create value for them, and understanding at all those different levels, because that's what's really important in terms of pricing your product, being able to communicate your product and service to customers, as well as internalizing it for your own business on what the cost of the number one failure, in my opinion, of startups is, which is the inability to successfully manage your human resources. So I like to stack it in that way, because value is really important, and then it's also going to be essential to your business to understand how to maintain your employee relationships and hire successfully. So let me expand on, oh, sorry, I want to go back real quick. And I want, at the bottom of this slide, there's a book here, and I want to add some value for you all today. One of my favorite books is called The Wide Lens. And this is a book that helps take a step back and give you perspective through different industries on how you can look at the full range of the supply chain and the value chain through a business ecosystem, all the way from raw materials all the way down through customers, and look at that through a wide lens and understand in each situation, if depending on where you're targeting your product or service, you have to understand how value is created at each step of that supply chain. And the more value you can create for each individual step, the more valuable your product and service is going to be. Likewise, if you look at it from a risk perspective, which is discussed in the wide lens, it brings up things like adoption risk. So for new technologies, this is really big. So when I was trying to commercialize the spring tire for NASA, one of the things that we ended up finding way later than we would have loved to is that you go to an auto shop, where they change your tire out, right? We were proposing a solution that had a tire and a wheel attached. Well, guess what? At every tire shop or every car body shop, they all have a mounting and balancing machine to actually get your tire on the rim. And what they told us was like, hey, listen, I don't care how valuable the tire technology is. If we have to go buy a new machine in order to maintain your tire, maintain your wheel system, we're not going to do it. You think about something like electric vehicles from an adoption risk perspective, where you see all of these charging stations have to pop up in all of these different places. Introducing new technology has adoption risk as well. And so you have to understand how each step in the ecosystem values your product or service, and understand what change that they have to make in order to adopt your product or service. So when we're talking about real innovation, real invention, unique technologies, it's very important to take a step back and say, well, what does my customer actually have to change as well beyond? And then you have to make sure that the value you're adding for them is going to be beyond their cost of change. So it's a really useful example. And again, check out the book, The Wide Lens by Ron Adner. If you're interested, if you feel like your business has some sort of adoption chain perspective and you want to get a different perspective on how value flows through an ecosystem. And it also be very useful to communicate to investors as well. So let me take this a step forward and give us a way to communicate value. Some of you may have heard about this term called the value proposition. My opinion is that it's kind of unfortunate because I feel like it's been a little bit cliche and overused, but at the same time, I double down on it because I use it for everything. Anytime, whether you're talking with your spouse or a friend or whatever, it's always important to understand how to articulate what you're able to provide value for someone, and then have a framework for that to do that repeatedly. And so I practice this all the time in every situation. And it's very simple. A value proposition brings together potential solutions and potential opportunities. On the opportunity side, opportunities are created by what is the customer attempting to do that you're helping them to do better? How are you helping them? What gains are you creating for them? And then what pains do they currently have that you could be solving for them? On the solution side, you match those things. I recognize that I have an opportunity to create a gain for you. And so here's how my product or service creates that gain. Likewise, if you have a pain point, can also communicate the way my product or service directly addresses that pain point. And then finally, for customer jobs, I understand what you're trying to do in your day to day, and this is how you can do that better with my solution. So there's this very simple framework that I would encourage everyone to use in presentations to investors, but also what I found, because I'm not really a sales guy, I've learned how to sell over time. But when I sell, I literally just try to communicate it through this lens of a value proposition. And what that template is for, who's it for? Who's the customer that you're actually talking to? And then what are they experiencing in terms of their gains and pains? So you like empathize with that. And then that helps create this emotional tension where then you can introduce what you offer. So now it's like I understand who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, or what your pains point are. And I'm offering you a better way. And here's high level details about how I deliver that value for you, how my product or service is going to do that. And then compared to what you have available today and other solutions in the market, this is how my solution is different. So very simple. For whom, who experience something, pains or gains, what you offer, what you deliver in terms of the value you're delivering, and then how is it different? Yes, against existing products and services in the market, but most importantly, what they're going through today. And this is a really concise, simple way to sell. It's concise and simple way to get customer feedback of what your value proposition is. And it's also, if you think about it this way, the cheapest, simplest prototype you could ever make of your product or service. Just being able to explain through a proposition what value that you're providing or trying to provide, and see if it's even interesting. And if it is, it allows you to start going into deeper conversations with folks. And I will say that if your value proposition in an investor conversation isn't crystal clear, most investors they're gonna identify that and try to pick it apart because they're gonna want to understand this information: who your customer is, what are they experiencing, what do you offer, how do you deliver that value, and then how is it different? And that's a value proposition. To learn more about a value proposition, I'll point you to another great book. This book is in some ways better than my resume because when I started my career in the Goodyear spring tire examples in this book as well. It's called Lean Startup and Large Organizations. So also if you're in the corporate world or you're working with corporations in terms of they might be your customer, this is a very impactful book on understanding how innovation is contextualized in a large organization and how to position the innovation in a way that you can overcome those challenges and actually get to a successful outcome. So again, that's Lean Startup and Large Organizations by Jim Eigner, Overcoming Resistance to Innovation. So why is communicating the value proposition so important? Well, as you all probably feel based on products and services that you buy, is that in a lot of ways it's subjective. It's not always clear cut. It's not always financial. And sometimes it can be very, very difficult to measure. But by understanding how a customer perceives value, and there's a few dimensions of that, you're able to help reduce uncertainty in your offering, how you're explaining to a customer, how you're explaining to an investor, how you're communicating within your teams, so that you have less opportunities that you miss because you weren't able to communicate it well, or you weren't aligned with what the perceived value is. And then it also reduces the risk because you're not thinking that you're providing value, and then you are, or that you might that versus what you're actually trying to do today. So I'll give you an example. One example of where the value proposition changes in the growth of the business, which is probably top 5 reasons that startups and new ventures aren't successful, is because they go through a phase with early adopters, people who really resonate with the value proposition. It creates a lot of value for them. That set of early adopters is, in most cases, depending on how big the company is getting, not the same, not equal to mass market adoption. So I'll say that again. The early adopters, your value proposition to early adopters, who are people who really resonate with that, is very rarely the same as mass market adoption. And so as your company is growing, if you're not paying attention to who your customer is and what value you're providing to them and how they're perceiving that, you actually go through an inflection point in a business where your ability to price it at a certain point for your early adopters will go down when you try to go to mass market. And then the flip side of that is that now those customers who value your product or service less, they're much harder to acquire. So your customer acquisition cost goes up, which is like marketing and sales. So now all of a sudden your gross profitability is under significant pressure when you go through this inflection point of how value changes from early adopters to mass market. Well, why does that happen? Because people make assumptions, companies and founders make assumptions that the first people that were their customers or the early adopters are going to value it the same as the entire rest of the market. They go raise a ton of money and they get a lot of traction at the beginning. And then all of a sudden they're scratching their head and saying, well, what happened to our profitability when we got to a certain point? Well, our value proposition wasn't as strong when our company grew, when we expanded beyond our early adopters, because the perceived value changes. So again, it's very important to say who your customer is and getting very, very crystal clear in your value proposition and constantly testing that as your business grows. So what is this perception of value? Well, on one side of the coin, you have things that increase the perception of value. It does the job well, it's easy, it gives me good feelings or emotions. And those things include, like, what are the benefits of the product or service? What are the benefits of the personnel? So just as simple as, like, is the person selling the solution to you, do you like them? Is it easy to buy it? Does it take a lot of effort for you to think through and compare to a bunch of alternatives, or have they made it just really easy for you? So there's also value that can create it just by how you sell and market the product that adds value for the customer versus maybe a similar product that's not sold very efficiently or not communicated very efficiently. And a confused mind in most cases will say no. So again, being crystal clear on understanding how your customer perceives value all the way through the sales process, through the delivery process. And then because there's things that reduce their perceived value. There are things where it's like, well, based on how it was advertised, it didn't really meet all the needs that you said it might. It was really difficult to use, or it was difficult to implement. And I just don't feel good about it for some reason, whatever it could be. And sometimes you don't know. So you have to test and you have to unwind those variables. Again, things that investors are going to challenge founders on about how well they know their customer. So there's things that reduce value, which is how much does it cost, obviously, but it's beyond that. It's how much time does it take? So say it requires a change in a process, not in a person, but in an organization, where they actually have to change their process. And now let's say it adds more time, might be a better solution, but adds more time to their day. So they might be less willing to adopt it because it takes longer to use it. But also could be it takes more energy to figure out how to use it and how to coordinate and get everybody aligned. This is very common in the healthcare space. And this is what procurement folks think about a lot in the healthcare space, where they say, this is a great technology, but how are we actually going to implement it in the hospital? It's something that can be a make or break for successful acquisition of a customer. And procurement folks in healthcare deal with that every day. And I'll tell you what, I'm not just specifically talking about healthcare, but it's just one that's been top of mind for me recently, which is they'll buy a product or service if it's just easy to implement, even if it's not the greatest product in the world. It's just easy. It's easy to implement. It's easy to train the employees how to use it. It's easy to maintain. It's easy to get the pricing from the sales guy. All of those things actually, in some cases, make a bigger impact to the success of selling a product or service in healthcare than the product value itself, which is counterintuitive, but it's just the way the world works. And then, it brings in things like psychological cost as well. Think about some people, and this is one of my favorite, when I'm hiring people, this is one of my favorite interview questions. I'll ask them something about assembling IKEA furniture. And it's like, some people really struggle with it. Some people, follow the instructions really well. Some people look at the instructions and throw it away, and then they half build it and they get really frustrated. And then it's like, you think about it, it's like, think about how you feel about IKEA furniture if you ever had it. And then if you ever talk to someone who does, sometimes it's very polarizing. It's even a joke in some cases, which is, if people really struggle to follow those type of instructions that IKEA provides, they might not buy from IKEA anymore, just because of the psychological cost involved. So these are things that are all really important to consider and to test. And I bring them up not just because it's important to understand the customer's perspective. And when you're doing tests with customers for your business, much more than just the technology or just the product or service that they're going to care about. There are assumptions and hypotheses that you need to test around how the full wide lens of their day-to-day and the organization's day-to-day and operations around what it would actually take to implement and adopt this product, and what companies have been successful and what companies haven't been successful selling them things. And investors are very aware of this as well. And so they will certainly bring that up in understanding what the viability of your business is. So to wrap up on this, which I want to make sure that you all have something to get started with. So it's not just talking. I'm very much action oriented. I don't like to lecture. I'm not a thought leader. I'm very much get my hands dirty with you. And so I want to try to provide you something of value where, if a lot of this is new to you today, there's two core concepts you can apply. One is lean learning loops. These are just super simple experiments. Create a hypothesis, get really specific on what that hypothesis is, and then test the hypothesis just like the scientific method. But those hypotheses may be things around all the things that are related to perceived value. They're things related to adoption risk. They're all things that actually might have more pull on your business, the success of your business, that's beyond just the technology itself. So things that you can do around that are, what does the customer like and what don't they like about existing products? Is the number of features more important than how easy it is to use? Think about your microwave, for example. Why does your microwave have so many buttons? How many of the buttons do you actually use? And do you make a decision to purchase a microwave based on how many buttons and custom features does it have? Not many people do. So then you wonder, like, why do microwaves have so many buttons? What is the minimum? And a great mindset is always like, what is the absolute minimum the customer would accept? Sometimes it's better to simplify the product and solution and focus more of the resources of the business, potential business, on how to address those other perceived value areas. And so you create experiments on that. So you can create prototypes. You can prototype a sales process. So the easiest way to prototype a sales process is through the value proposition. It's something you can send in an email to somebody and say, hey, are you interested in this? Is this appealing at all? You can conduct research to learn more specific about where people have been successful in your industry in a similar type of venture. You can look at what existing solutions do well or don't do well. And then you could also find some way to provide something for free in order to get feedback for customers. Those are all things that you can create into experiments, simple experiments, single variable experiments that are very easy to measure, very quick and simple to do, where the goal of these lean learning loops is the lowest possible cost, the shortest amount of time to learn something, and then very, very targeted on what you're trying to learn. And those things should be aligned to what's most important to the success of your business. On the other side, how to understand more about customers. And it isn't related to just customers in the market. It's, if your potential customers are B2B, the type of questions you can ask are, well, how do I get into, in the healthcare example, like, how do I get into the hospital and get with the procurement person or get with the people that are implementing these solutions and be able to just observe how they're actually doing that? Right. And what's great at VCU is that there's an opportunity to do that because we have a lot of assets at VCU in order to learn these things. and without actually having to learn them with potential customers that may result in the potential non-success of you being able to sell. So ethnography, market research, again, like I say these things very high level, but these words are really important to dive deeper into understanding how to do this. How to do more customer surveys and interviews and be very targeted. Again, experimental thinking. What data is out there that we can learn from? And then who are experts that I can consult to learn more about this? This helps you develop your value proposition and refine it over time in a way that then allows you and gives you more confidence to position your product and solution to what actually creates value for the customer instead of what you might think creates value. And from a lean perspective, if the customer doesn't value something, then it's considered waste. So how do I learn what the customer actually values? And everything that they don't value, it's a great candidate to not focus on resources on in terms of development. So I hope that this was useful for you all. I know it's hard to just talk to a screen and try to absorb all this, especially if it's new. But I gave you a couple book references, and a lot of these terms, are easy to watch YouTube videos and stuff on Google. And then, of course, I'm available to be a resource if you need to ask questions beyond this conversation today. My mission is to help as many entrepreneurs be successful as possible. So I would value, being able to help you in any way. So with that, I'll pass it back to Ellie and do some Q&A.
Great presentation. Thank you so much, Adam. You guys can feel free to turn your cameras on if you feel like it. Stay muted. If you have a question, put it in the chat. We'll address it, and Adam will give answer to the best of his ability. Therefore, we're ready to go. I don't see any questions as of now, but feel free to unmute yourself, ask it, or put it in the chat.
So since no one had any questions right away, I do want to tell an anecdotal story. I think I may have shared this with Adam previously. A few years ago, I was part of a startup developing software for interoperability of medical devices. There was a California competitor. They had raised about $5 million more than us. And by more, I mean, I think our startup had only raised about $800,000 total at the time. Their software was better than ours, more mature. They weren't very good at communicating their value. And the one area where our startup didn't spare any expense was in marketing. And we very quickly got picked up by the customers, and we communicated with our customers and figured out how to make ours better. And within a year, we still hadn't raised as much money as they had, but our product was better. We were outselling them, and within 2 years, they were out of business because our startup had taken up pretty much, all of the target customers that in that sector. So it really is important how well you can. And I'm sure that there's hundreds and hundreds of examples like that, where just the company that isn't the best product, but they're better able to communicate why their product is useful to the customers, and those succeed.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of the biggest challenges to innovation, is because you have the greatest product and service in the world, but if you can't articulate what the value is to a customer in a way that it means something to them, then they don't care. And it's the same thing, whether it's stakeholders in a corporation or it's to investors. Everyone wants to start with, I need to understand the potential for the value, what value is created here, because in the back of my mind, I know that I have to pay you for it. And what the difference between those two things are is ultimately going to be the decision factor for me, and those things are not obvious. So it's an experimental process as well.
Well, I don't see any questions, so it looks like that was a great presentation. You left everybody with all the information they needed.
Yep.
And if anybody does have any questions over the time, feel free to email myself or Brent, and we can get those questions over to Adam. We can connect you as well. But if anybody has any last words, other than that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Some of y'all have to have questions. Hold on, I'm not going to let you off the hook. Somebody give me one question. I know you got to be thinking about something, or you wouldn't have joined this call.
Adam, this is Franklin.
Hi,
Got a
Franklin.
question. How do you communicate this? I mean, this is very business oriented, business directed. How do you communicate this to people who are basically project is still in the early lab stage and
Hmm.
looking to advance this?
Hmm. Do you have a specific example we could talk about?
No, I've just worked with a lot of faculty
Hmm.
that have no concept of this is a great invention, IP. Somebody ought to use it, but we don't know where to go next.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's where I would the leading point when I'm having those conversations with folks is going back to the first principle about what value is. So how, instead of saying like, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, how is it helping somebody do something better? And what is that? Let's get really specific on what that is and who that person who it's for. Because it can't be for everyone. It has to be for some sort of particular type of customer with a particular type of need. And then how is it actually making whatever they're doing, their process, their life, how is it helping them do something better than what they do today? Um, and that can be a really hard question for early stage technologies. But then that's also the same challenge when it comes time to for stakeholders to say cut costs in their R&D budget. You know what they want to hear is, well, why are we making this? Like, what's the vision for what this technology could do? And sometimes that question is framed just so, which leads to a technical answer instead of an answer around, well, this could really change and impact the lives of certain people. It could be the patient in the healthcare space. It could be a manufacturer. It could be, the university. This is a way to improve, add value to the university, but it has to start with some sort of tangible value, like how is this helping somebody do something better or different? And then that normally helps lead to follow-up questions on digging into what are we after here? What's the vision for this? And it doesn't have to be specific at the beginning, but it does need to be grounded to who's this actually going to help? And if there's no answer for that, then there is the question about, well, then why are we doing this? And sometimes it's good to take a step back at that point and figure that out before continuing to develop the tech.
As an entrepreneur in residence, is that something that you would sit down with the team and whiteboard out this? Basically in person instead of trying to do something like this over Zoom, which is
100%. I'm very much about workshops, exercises, and creative action, and then helping you do it, helping you actually do it. Again, it's like so I'll give you an actual concrete example. So my value proposition as a chief fractional officer, or as fractional chief operating officer, it's hard to say, is one of the things that frustrates me is around, you have a bunch of people who are like advisors who like to tell you, hey, you could do this, or we'll give you a bunch of different options. And on the other side of the coin, you have people that are like consultants who are not necessarily, they're profiting off of working with you. They're not necessarily engaged with you. They don't necessarily care about the future of their company. They just want to get the money for that project. So as a fractional chief operating officer, instead of me being a full-time chief operating officer for a company like I've done for most of my career, I want to be with companies and startups or ventures, or even if it's a nonprofit or it's just 15 minutes a week, with students, and actually hands-on partnering with them, getting my hands dirty and helping them do it with them. So it's like the old adage of you can you can fish for someone, you can teach them how to fish, or you can, tell them how to fish, basically. I want to focus on, I'm out there fishing with you and actually getting my hands dirty. And then hopefully eventually that you'll be able to do it yourself. But if you can't, I still want to help you do it. So it's like, that's how I try to position my value proposition versus why you could go get an advisor to do something similar that I could do for you, or why you could go get a consultant, or even that you could hire a full-time person who may not be the right hire, and then think about employee turnover again. So
right.
that's how I try to, even at my own level, I practice what I preach and I try to get really focused on that. And that's what I like to help people do.
Excellent. Thanks.
Franklin, I kind of want to follow up on that. So thank you for asking that. And it's good to point out, so three of the accelerator teams on the call right now. I think there were 4 earlier, but someone had to drop off. And so Adam's agreed to work with all of you guys to help work through some of the stuff if you need, well, hopefully doing it before the pitch so that you can revise your pitches, help craft them a bit better. So he's available this week and next week to help you guys both work on that, as well as, reviewing your pitches. I would have loved to have gotten Adam brought on board earlier, but we just met him a week and a half ago. So it's we're trying to get him integrated as quickly as we can.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll make sure you get that link to information. It's just a calendar, and feel free to schedule a time for me that works best for you. Thank you for that question, Franklin.
Yep. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time and your presentation, Adam, and thank you everybody for coming and attending and asking your question, Franklin. We are hopefully working on getting the recordings and the presentations somewhere on our website so that we can share them with you so you can access them in the future. We'll send you all an email once that's ready. But thank you again, everybody, for attending, and thank you, Adam, for your presentation.
My pleasure. Looking forward to working with everyone.
Bye.
Oh, bye.